Hey, Facebook friends, welcome to another edition of Pub Theology San Antonio. I'm with some really good friends of mine coming up, and we're going to bring them on the screen right now. With us right now today for Pub Theology, we have Mayor Ron Nirenberg, Pastor Max Lucado, Rabbi Samuel Stahl, and my co-host for Pub Theology, reporter Becca McNeil from Christianity Today. We're going to be having a discussion not only about the COVID crisis, but about how we can find stories of hope. We can find personal hope in this type of crisis. Pub Theology sometimes dives into theology and spirituality every once in a while. We hope so. And this is going to be an opportunity to do such. So we're going to ask Pastor Max from Oak Hills Church to open us up in a prayer. I know Pub Theology is open to all faiths. It's all people. All perspectives are welcome at Pub Theology to join in this community dialogue. But we felt like during this time of crisis, an opening prayer would be appropriate. So, Pastor Max, can you pray for us?
I sure will. Well, Heavenly Father, we are united now in a global crisis. And in this hour, we know that you and you alone are great. You and you alone are sovereign. We acknowledge that you are mysterious, that you have ways that are above ours. You have thoughts that are above ours. We ask you to have mercy upon us. Have mercy upon us. And we pray that you would comfort every person who's a part of this conversation. We thank you especially for our mayor, who is investing and has invested so many hours in unspeakably difficult decisions. And today we ask a blessing to be upon him. And also we pray for those that are extremely affected by this, medical workers, those who are exposed to the virus by virtue of their sacrifice and their call in life, those who are most vulnerable, those who find themselves without financial support or any type of net to land in. We pray, Father, as you look upon this great city, that you would find those pockets of people who, by virtue of courage or catastrophe, find themselves especially stressed, and have mercy upon them. And now, Lord, would you take this conversation and use it to inform and encourage? We pray in the name of all hope. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Max, for that wonderful prayer. Again, I want to introduce people. If you're just joining us, welcome to Pub Theology. We are premiering this on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So thank you for joining us today. Feel free to comment below, and some of us will be online and answer your questions at 7 p.m. Just if you're watching us, we're going to speak to Max Lucado, who's the senior pastor of Oak Hills Church. He's an author of many, many, many books. Over 100 million books have been sold, and a great pastor not only to San Antonio but across the world. We're here with Mayor Ron Nirenberg, the mayor of the city of San Antonio, and Rabbi Samuel Stahl, the Rabbi Emeritus at Temple Bethel here in San Antonio. And again, Becca McNeil, my co-host. And so we're going to ask Max and the mayor just to talk for a few minutes. And then after that, Becca will jump in and speak to the mayor as well. So thanks for joining us. The mayor and Ron, the floor is yours.
Well, can I jump in and speak on behalf of the whole city and thank you, Mayor? I cannot begin to imagine. I try to imagine the number of hours of sleep you've had. Probably they're in single digits over several days. Thank you so much. Thank you for your diligence. Thank you for your sacrificial service. Thank you for being such a steady leader in a storm that nobody saw coming. And I'm speaking on behalf of, I know, thousands of folks in our church and then hundreds of thousands around the area. We really appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Max. I don't feel like I deserve the thanks. It's really just, it's just my job. But really, the work that's going on here at the city is the result of thousands of people who are very selflessly giving of their safety in many respects to keep all of us safe. I think you said it right. Nobody could have predicted exactly where we would be right now, even a month ago. But it's very gratifying to see the outpouring of support from, the nurses and the medical technicians and the hospital workers to our firefighters and police officers, and even the grocery store clerks and folks who, unfortunately, don't have the opportunity to shut it down, even when the rest of the country seems to be doing that. This life does have to go on for some, and anyway, it makes me very proud to be a resident of San Antonio, to see all of the just incredible service that's going on right now. Some in defiance of anything you would think would be possible. But thank you on their behalf. Thank you.
Yeah. What do you find to be the most challenging issue you're dealing with right now?
We are in a health crisis. There's no doubt. And the threat to human health and safety and the lives is demonstrably real when you turn on the TV and see parts of the country that are so gripped with the disease. We are sort of in the beginning stages of it. I would say the hardest part of this effort right now is to make sure people have a calm and practical sense of how to keep themselves safe and their families safe, and a sense of the reality of what's going on. A month ago, New York City, for instance, was having the same conversations we were 2 weeks ago, and no one could have foreseen, or no one, I think, predicted the level of intensity that they're seeing in such a short period of time. So I think part of it is just making sure people have a rational, calm way of going about their lives that keeps themselves and their community safe.
How much of that is balancing urgency versus calm? I mean, it seems like you have to weigh every announcement and every urging of the public to try to predict how people will behave.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think anyone was used to the kind of regulation that has now been in probably 90% of our country. Can you imagine the whole country being told that you have to stay inside? So some of this has been just listening to our doctors, listening to our health authorities, and slowly getting us to the point where, stay at home actually is part of our lexicon. But, my big focus right now is to make sure that we are being as transparent and timely with information as possible, so that people have the information they need to make informed decisions to protect themselves and their families, and at the same time have a level of trust with the health authority, with the city and county government, so that we can implement some of these measures that we know are saving lives. Americans are not used to being told by their government to stay at home, but it is absolutely vital for us to do right now, and that requires a level of trust that we are all, in fact, in this together.
Yeah. One of the big discussions I'd be interested to hear your perspective on, especially given who we have with us today, is the directive, on the one hand, basically about churches being essential businesses versus the wisdom of gathering and or essential services. I've heard some really good perspective from pastors, honestly, about that. And tell me kind of what the feedback was that you got from our local faith community as they got that mixed message from the governor?
Yeah, I would say it was immediate and in unison, that they recognized the importance of social distancing and staying at home to the welfare of their congregations. Our faith community has been out front from the very start on this. And I remember a month ago getting a text message from Pastor Newton over at Community Bible Church, asking me, about social distancing and how they can how they could be proactive to make sure that their folks are healthy. So when the mixed messages started to come a little bit, I immediately went back to Pastor Newton and others that I stay in regular contact with in the faith community, and told them sort of the difficult position that we're put in asking people not to congregate in houses of worship, and they got it immediately. And in fact, I think over the last month, you've seen a lot of innovation and encouragement of parishioners to utilize technology to stay close. Even within our own homebound isolation, we seem to be more connected in many ways to each other because of the mission of staying at home is about keeping each other alive.
Yeah.
So it was immediate, and it was understanding, and it was very clear that they wanted to go ahead and voluntarily, not do any in-person services for the benefit of everyone's health. And it was very gratifying to see that.
It seems like a testament to how seriously those people take their faith and their charge to care for people.
Yeah, absolutely. We know from a practical standpoint, congregations by their very nature are mixed generation, and so that inherently provides that inherently lends to risk of sickness. So there's that. But I do think there's an element of faith that's involved with this. There's a very clear sense that I get from members of our faith community and of all faiths and denominations that they have a clear mission in leading the community through this crisis. And part of that effort is to help people to understand how important it is that we all look out for each other's health and to listen to our public health authorities.
Absolutely. And so the word unprecedented keeps coming up. And I mean, a good illustration of that is churches not gathering on Easter, and just as far as how severe this is, but also stay at home orders, this added level of the government speaking to people. What have we learned now that we know? I feel like now that this can has been opened, it's possible for it to happen again. And what have we learned to help us be ready next time? Like, what are the structures we're putting in place?
In terms of pandemic?
Yeah, or just like emergency response as well.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a number of things that have been learned in terms of a pandemic health emergency response. The first one is that we have to take very seriously health outbreaks that happen on the other side of the world, no matter how minuscule they might appear at first.
Right.
We saw how rapidly coronavirus went from a small region in China all the way to, engulfing the entire country. And now we have, nearly 500,000 Americans who have been affected. Mm-hmm. We have to pay attention to that. And when we see those kinds of elements emerging, I think it's very important that we start to ramp up our capacity to deal with what could be widespread infection here. We didn't do that in the United States. We didn't step up testing capacity. We didn't stand up emergency response and surge capacity in hospitals in any realistic way until really March, till last month. Yeah. And that has put everybody, that has put every community behind the eight ball, because now you have every community in the country that's competing for the same resources in order to be in the best position possible for a potential surge in cases. So I think there's a lot to be learned from that. I think the other bigger lesson learned, though, in terms of government response is how important transparency and public information is during a pandemic. Thankfully, in San Antonio, we have been, really intensely focusing on putting out information timely, putting it out often, listening back to the community and from the media about concerns about the way we're putting out information and making corrections along the way. We've been on the forefront of that. And you see in other communities where that's not occurring, and they don't have, it appears to me that they don't have the level of response from the community when there's orders being implemented that have to do with social distancing. Maintaining a level of trust through critically important to being able to contain a disease outbreak in a community.
Yeah. So tell us what has been the most, give us the hope story. What has been the most encouraging response you've seen from the community?
There's been a lot. I went to the food bank, one of their mega distributions yesterday. It was at Morgan's Wonderland, or at the Toyota Field, and I think there must have been 5,000 cars in line, and there was an aerial photograph in the paper, and it just showed it was just immense level of need. But there were 2 hands to every, or I would say 4 hands to every box that was in the parking lot. There is literally an army of volunteers out there that is willing to step into the void for food bank to distribute food to our families. That's one point for me of a very clear light. On the 28th, I guess it must have been last weekend, Pastor Helmke, our faith-based liaison at the city, put together a day, literally within a day, she put together a day-long reflection for our community that lasted, no kidding, from sun up till I think about 6 o'clock at night, with members of the community coming on, different faith congregations coming on to talk about what gives them hope and what keeps them connected during a time of great isolation. I'm moved by pictures I see on Facebook of the mother of a young daughter who will go nameless, but who works in the healthcare field, and she came home after one of her shifts and saw that her daughter had written on the driveway, "Welcome home, hero."
Oh.
It redefines in many ways who our heroes are in this community, which I think is really, really awesome.
Agreed.
That's great. Thank you, Mayor, for that word of encouragement. Again, I just want to voice appreciation for your leadership and your entire team, the staff that go unnoticed, right? The people behind the scenes still cleaning our roads, taking out our trash, things that people are doing that it's somewhat risky, but are stepping out and serving for the public good. Bring Max back in, because I want to bring Max back in with you real fast. And Max, let me see if I can get this here. Can you unmute yourself, Max? I think you might have to unmute yourself. There you go.
I don't have the future as a producer.
It's okay. I was trying. But Max, your congregation at Oak Hills Church not only is a very large congregation, it has multiple campuses. You're related to other campuses. Tell us a little bit what your network of churches have been doing during this time of crisis.
Well, the mayor was exactly right. The churches with which we work and our congregation, which consists of a few campuses, responded quickly, really quickly and willingly. Nobody had any hesitation to stop meeting together publicly. It came as a shock. I mean, for crying out loud. Some of us recall 9/11, in the first place everybody wanted to go was to some house of worship, just for some reflection and prayer and encouragement. and now that wasn't available. So that you know, be honest, it was a shock, but people understand, they get it, and we're seeing some wonderful things come out of it. You know, our online watching. I hear churches all across the country saying they've got 2 or 3 times the number of people watching online than typically would. I'm hearing a lot of churches talk about, believe it or not, their giving is up. Their giving is up. Who would have thought? You know, people are generous. They're generous. And so, yeah, we're trying to do our very best. All of our small groups and Bible classes are doing what we're doing right now, just making use of technology, and it's working out good.
My old dad, I'm like an old grandpa here. I'm sorry, I can't even unmute myself. But I encourage anyone right now, a great opportunity to see all these faith bases in action, right? You can get online and view probably a sermon from Max, and we're going to bring in right now Rabbi Stahl to this conversation right now. Rabbi, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, and I'm very honored to share my time with the mayor, who's given stellar, unbridled visionary leadership during this terrible crisis, and with my distinguished colleague Max Lucado, whom I greatly respect and have known for many centuries,
Many years,
decades. But anyway, tonight, as you may know, we usher in the biggest family holiday of the year, holiday of Passover. The slavery, we remember the slavery experience of the Israelites in Egypt and the ultimate liberation through Moses by God. This is a time when families, more than any other time during the year, get together around the dinner table and retell the story of the Exodus and emancipation and draw lessons from that experience. So as I say, it's a time of family solidarity. It's so painful this year that we have to do all of this virtually. So this holiday takes on a special poignancy for us as we usher it in. I can't hear you.
It keeps cutting out. All right, so thank you, Rabbi. You are going to do an online Seder meal coming up, which is interesting. I think that's this evening. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, every year I edit a Haggadah, which is the narrative, the liturgy that we use at the Passover Seder table. My son-in-law in Maryland has produced a slideshow that will illustrate each of the different rubrics of the Passover Seder. So as we're reading the Seder, he's going to be putting different scenes that illustrate those messages in that particular part of the Seder. So another thing I want to mention is how fortunate some of us are during this time. True, we can't be with our families, but I think of we're in some ways in a self-contained ghetto. But our people, the Jewish people, have known ghettos for centuries. I think of the people in the Warsaw Ghetto in the early 40s during the Holocaust. They didn't have TVs. They didn't have computers. They had no way of communicating. They were starving to death. They also feared for their lives. We have nobody coming after us. We have no people that want to kill us. So this is a huge change from what has happened, in over the decades, to our, which gives me hope. Also, we are a people of hope as Jews. We're called Asirei Tikva in the Bible, prisoners of hope. It's a phrase from the prophets, I believe. And prisoners of hope means that we are chained to hope. We have gone through terrible times, but I remember hearing when the people in Auschwitz entered the gas chamber in the nearby death camp of Birkenau, they sang the traditional hymn, "I believe with perfect faith in the coming of the Messianic age, better times ahead, the golden age ahead." Even though the Messiah may tarry, nonetheless, I continue to believe. And that kind of faith sustained them spiritually, even though physically they were about to lose their lives. And I think also of something else, and I heard this from a great Protestant pastor, William Sloane Coffin, who he had a terrible tragedy. He lost his 26-year-old son in an auto accident. And the following Sunday morning at Riverside Church, where he was a senior pastor, Riverside Church in New York, one of the most well-known houses of worship in the United States, he wanted to respond to the question, how can you still believe in God after the terrible ordeal that you've just experienced? And he gave a profound answer I've quoted often. He said, God gives us minimal protection and maximal support. In other words, God doesn't prevent this pandemic, but God gives us the resources, the tools, the equipment, the spiritual equipment to get through it, to endure it.
Wow, that's really great. As we continue our dialogue with Rabbi Stahl and Pastor Max Lucado and Mayor Ron Nirenberg, if any of y'all have to leave during this time, I know it's sensitive. So Ron, if you have to take off at any time, you can stay with us and join this conversation. We appreciate your leadership again. His first day in office, Ron Nirenberg signed, what was it called? It's compassion. Was it the declaration? Uh-oh, here we go. I'm bad at my own. Say that again, Ron.
It was the city's charter for compassion.
The Charter for Compassion. First day in office, he signed that. He united many faith groups to support that so that we can be a city that refocuses on compassion. And what a prophetic thing to do, because right now compassion is more than important during this time right now. And so thank you for that leadership. Rabbi, before you have to leave and go back to your responsibilities, a little bit, right now a lot of people are experiencing fear. How do you talk to people about fear instead of just pushing it aside? How do we really use that in our faith as almost like a friend, right? An appropriate friend in our lives every once in a while. So tell us a little bit about your view on fear.
Well, we have to distinguish between rational fear and irrational fear. Irrational fear is damaging. It's inhibiting, and I think that was the reason that people had this run. Why the grocery stores has this run on toilet paper, because they had a rational fear that we would never have toilet paper again, and it caused all kinds of havoc in trying to supply people with toilet paper of all things. So that's irrational fear. But rational fear, I think, is a good thing because of rational fear, we are urged to stay indoors, to stay no more than 6 feet from each other when we do have to have a human encounter. So to take all these precautions is a response to a rational fear. So I think it's positive, and I think it's helpful.
That's good. And I'm going to bring Max back in for a little bit. You can unmute a little bit. Max, when people consumed by fear, the fear takes over their lives, what are some things that you tell not only your followers and your congregation to help them move past that?
Yeah, what we're dealing with is the virus, but we're also dealing with the fear of the virus. I so appreciate the rabbi and what he had to say there, because if we respond to irrational fears, they begin to consume us. So I think there are 2 or 3 things that are really, really important. Number one, let's remember that anxiety is a part of life. There's no passage in the Bible that says that anxiety is a sin, and nobody escapes anxiety. It comes with life, but anxiety does not have to consume our life. There's a beautiful passage in the book of Psalms that do not fret, it only causes harm. We know that. I mean, it causes harm to our bowels, our necks, our heads. I mean, And so anxiety is going to come, but the challenge is interrupting it before it takes control of us. And I think there are some certain things that we can do. Even if you're not a spiritual person, there are certain things you can do. You know, I'd love to get the rabbi to comment on the story of Joseph in the Old Testament, because I think that's a story of somebody responding to a crisis in such a way that he was able, by God's provision, to take care of a world that was facing a famine. I mean, he could have freaked out. He came to understand by vision, by virtue of a supernatural dream, that the world was about to go into a famine. But rather than, you know, give in and cave in, he made preparation. He was immediately promoted to the equivalent of prime minister of Egypt, and he stepped into action. He became a person of action. He set aside enough grain in the silos to take care not just of Egypt, but to take care of the then known world. And God used him to protect the nation of Israel. Right, Rabbi?
You gave a beautiful explanation, Max. I also want to point out that this whole narrative showed tremendous maturation and growth, because when Moses is first presented to us in the book of Genesis, he's really a spoiled brat. He's very self-centered, he's very narcissistic, and going through the experience in Egypt of being imprisoned and suffering there really developed his soul, and so much that he became outer directed instead of inner directed. And he cared about his people and the people of Egypt and the people everywhere. In fact, he even brought his family. He could have, because they had abandoned him, he could have abandoned them, but he wanted to bring them to Egypt to be saved from the famine. So it shows tremendous growth and vision and caring, which he didn't display or exhibit at the beginning of his life.
And that's a great point. That's a great point. And remember that famous passage in Genesis 50:20 when he's talking to his brothers. And like I say, that they didn't recognize him at first. He had to disclose to them who he was. He could have thrown them in prison and settled the score with them because they sold him into slavery.
Right.
But he, talking about their betrayal, he said what was intended for evil, speaking of their betrayal, God used for good.
Right.
God
right.
used for good.
Right.
And so God is the one who took that and used it for good. That tells me that Joseph had matured from that, like you say, that selfish brat who was showing off his new coat, to the point where he could see how God could take something that was very difficult and turn it into something that would not only save Israel, but save the then known world. And that's a man of faith.
That's right. That's what I call spiritual reframing.
There you go.
He took a situation of extreme difficulty and turned it into a blessing.
He did, didn't he?
Wow, that's an amazing discussion. We want to turn it into, we talked a little bit about fear. When we talk about our faith lives and people who may not even have a traditional faith background, how do we talk about hope? You know, a lot of times when we talk about hope, it's kind of thrown in with faith and hope and love, and people just kind of see it as a word out there that sounds religious or it sounds nice. But talk about in both your traditions about just the theology of hope. What does it really mean to be hopeful and find hope? And so, Max, talk a little bit about your view on Christian hope and faithful hope.
Well, from a Christian perspective, we have hope because there's a good God. That's it. We just believe in a good God. We believe in the existence of a good God. We believe he's high above us, but we also believe he's right here with us. We believe the presence of the Holy Spirit inside of us. And so we believe in a God who, in the Christian message, became flesh and entered the world, and in doing so, entered our sufferings. And just as the rabbi was explaining the significance, the high significance of this for the Jewish community, of course, it's extremely significant for us as well. Good Friday, we celebrate the hope that God on earth took on all of our sin and paid the price so that we, by virtue of his victory, could go to heaven, and then Easter Sunday rose from the dead as a demonstration, a picture and proof of what we will experience as well. But everything is rooted, whether Old Testament or New, Old Covenant or New Covenant, everything is rooted in the character of God, in the character of God. I urge people, don't try to filter this just through what they're saying on Fox or what they're saying on CNN or about the political arguments that are going on. Back away, and see how many times God has taken these challenges and turned them into something good. The Bible acknowledges this world is out of balance. It's out of balance, but someday that balance is going to be returned. But until then, we believe in a good God who shows up, who helps his people, and we would like to set our hope on that God.
Rabbi, do you have any conclusions?
Yes. In our common scriptures, we have the very hopeful verse, "Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes in the morning."
I was just quoting that yesterday, Rabbi. I was just quoting that yesterday.
Oh yeah, and also tonight when we end the Seder, the last words that we say are L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Now that doesn't mean we're going to take a trip to Jerusalem, the physical Jerusalem next year. We're talking about a messianic Jerusalem, a Jerusalem of the distant future, when there will be no more disease, no more bloodshed, no more hostility, and the world will be at peace.
Wow, that is a message of hope, and I just encourage people right now when we talk about a Seder meal, when we talk about Christian communion or Holy Communion, these elements that usually we're together in, right? We're sharing wine, we're sharing bread, we're sharing stories. Right now, it's Holy Week in the Christian tradition, and it really kicks in today and tomorrow with Maundy Thursday and Good Friday, and then Holy Saturday, and then Easter Sunday, where a lot of people are used to community with one another. How would you, as faith leaders, encourage people during these holy days and during a place like a Seder meal? How do we stay connected and still feel that real sense of power of community? I'll let any of you answer first.
I'd like to jump in, and far be it from me to speak as an expert on the Passover with the rabbi here. But my perception of the Passover is that it began as God's way to protect his people. As he was liberating them from Egyptian captivity, he kind of told them to stay indoors. And the blood of the lamb was painted over the doorpost as a way of protecting them in a very hostile, difficult, kind of a pandemic, if you will. But I would speak a little more confidently with the story of the disciples of Christ on Easter Sunday. Really the first ever Easter service found them also huddled in a room, just like the Hebrews were huddled on Passover. So the disciples were huddled for fear of the Jews. They thought, as far as they knew, the crucifixion that had found Christ, that those same people would come and crucify them. So they were hiding in the upper room for fear of the Jews. And yet Christ came and he stood right in the middle of them, and said, "Peace be with you." He said it twice the first Sunday and once the next. So Christ shows up bringing peace into Easter. So I find I find a lot of comfort there, because the two great events of faith, the Passover and the Easter celebration, both begin with people kind of hiding or protected or huddled in a home. And that's where we're going to find ourselves this Sunday, and this Passover celebration. We're going to all be kind of huddled, but you know what? God doesn't have to have a building. God doesn't have to have any clergy, or he doesn't have to have any type of organization. So he's going to be present, and he's going to bring a lot of hope.
Community in Judaism is central. In fact, we emphasize community over individual relationships with God. We, for example, are not supposed to have public prayer. We can't say certain prayers unless 10 adult Jews are assembled in a service. And of course, those people who take that literally right now are having trouble whether being part of a prayer circle virtually counts, or whether you have to be physically present with other Jews in a quorum of 10. We call it a minyan. And all of our festivals and holidays are communally based. The idea in a congregation, for example, in a synagogue, we don't count individual members; we count families. So that's so as I say, it's a recurrent motif throughout all of Jewish practice and belief.
Wow, that's great. One thing that I think people have to remember is we're finding new ways to do community all the time. It's always changing throughout history, and faith-based communities always find new ways to make those communities happen. And right now, whether it's online or an online dinner, countless friends conversations, catching up with old people you haven't spoken to, and in many years, people are gathered around and sharing this community. And I thank you two for sharing a little bit about that. I'm going to bring back Becca McNeil in. She'll have a few questions for us before the rabbi has to go and prepare for his meal, and then we'll continue a little bit of conversation with Max. So Becca, I'm going to bring you back in.
Hi. So kind of on the same vein, one of my favorite things I've heard someone say, it was a pastor who had actually called into this same discussion on Texas Public Radio, and he said, yes, faith communities are essential. Gathering in person is not essential right now. And so it's just drawn us, I think, deep into a conversation about the essential elements of our faith, of our various faiths. And you guys have talked about the role of community, but this role, this caring for others, and how we have never really had to create a hierarchy of care in this same way. Taking care of yourself so you can take care of others who are the high risk communities. So talk to me a little bit about almost the difficulty of pastoring and shepherding people who are making tough decisions about loving others, and what does it mean for them, and what are the limits of what they can do. And then at the same time, nudging people to be generous and caring, but urging them to be wise. And so I'd love to hear y'all's perspective on those conversations that you may have been having with people as they look to you for wisdom on what the particulars of loving others look like.
Rabbi, would you like to go first?
All right. We are known in the Talmud as merciful ones who are descendants of merciful ones. And that's been sort of the hallmark of our faith, to reach out, to be compassionate. 36 times we're reminded in the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the 5 books of Moses, that we were slaves in the land of Egypt. 36 times we're reminded, and therefore we should know the heart of the stranger, of the homeless, of the poor, of the downtrodden. It's very easy to forget the lessons of history, and that's the reason I think we have to be hit over the head 36 different times. Most commandments of the Bible are repeated once, maybe twice. This one 36 times, just to emphasize and re-emphasize that critical lesson of caring, reaching out, not being self-centered.
Absolutely. And we're seeing the things Ron was talking about strike me as moments of that. Max, what are your thoughts?
I think people are doing the very best they can. It's just hard, Becca. It's hard. I mean, every single one of us want to go see people in the hospital.
Yeah.
Every single one of us want to call on our neighbors. Every single one of us want to go to a convalescent home. We have a neighborhood Bible study group, and we are meeting by Zoom call. It's not anything like what we want to do. We're typically in a living room, but we're just doing the very best we can. Last night, I just heard 2 or 3 people on the Zoom call pouring their hearts out to the other 20 or 30 folks on the Zoom call, just talking about how hard this is. And so I acknowledge, man, there's no simple solution. Nothing takes the place of hugging a kid. Nothing takes the place of laying on of hands and praying for somebody. I mean, for crying out loud, we can't even baptize people. And when we celebrate communion, everybody's having to do it in their homes. But I maintain that these values that we appreciate so much, that maybe this is an opportunity that we will experience the Holy Spirit and the presence of God in a more supernatural way, that we're going to experience some things in a more authentic fashion. And, again, far be it from me to say why all of this is happening. A possible downside of this is we may have gotten a little too fancy. Maybe we've been relying upon buildings and pastors and clergy and, bands and videos. And now we're going to say, man, when it comes down to it, nothing. Bring that day back quickly when I can go and visit people in the hospital and just pray for somebody. So maybe we'll appreciate it more. Gavin's role when helping the homeless, I mean, that's a whole different dimension of this. Right. I'm talking about helping people whose struggle is they just maybe are not able to get out of their house, but they live in a nice house, they've got plenty of food. What Gavin does is an entirely different dimension of ministry.
Yeah, and it's been difficult. I mean, the power of human touch, especially those who are marginalized and poor or homeless, the power of, they don't get a lot of positive touch, right? And so it's been different to serve them still through social distancing, working through the city of San Antonio, Centro, downtown, to appropriately give meals, warm meals to people in need. You still have to have that social barrier, and it has been tough. And I long for the day where I can go back and hug my friends on the street. Max and I grew up in a tradition called the Churches of Christ, and it was a beautiful tradition growing up. And one of the things that is common on many Church of Christ signs, it says the phrase "Church of Christ meets here." And I think the reason for that is they believe that the people are the church. Now, a lot of denominations, a lot of faiths believe this, but I remember always seeing that on the sign that I went to in Brenham, Texas, where my ranch was. It said "meets here." And it's a reminder that we can meet anywhere, right? So if the Church of Christ was meeting through Zoom, they could just say, the Church of Christ meets here, and it happens to be on Zoom instead of a building in town. And as it was a good reminder for me from my Church of Christ days that we can meet at a lot of places and still be the body what we believe in. So
yes, I want to add to what Max said about how people are hurting in congregations. I have a rabbinical colleague in Houston who just lost his wife after a terrible bout of Alzheimer's, progressive Alzheimer's. And he was telling me, we called him yesterday to express our condolences. He was telling me at the funeral, which took place only at graveside, he was allowed a maximum of 10 people, and that included the funeral director and the 3 members of the clergy that officiated, and his daughter and his very good friend. That was it. And he said the hardest thing was they couldn't hug him, or he couldn't hug them. And he needed that human touch so much, in his grief and his sorrow, and he couldn't get it.
yeah, that is powerful, and something that we're long for. Again, it's going to make us, like Max said, appreciate some of the really truly things we could value. I think a lot of us got caught up in the price tags of other things. We put a lot of value in a lot of things in our faith groups that maybe we will take those price tags off and say, you know what, I don't think that has much value. Here's what really has value. And maybe it's a calling, a great awakening again. We've had awakenings before in our 3 of them in our nation. Maybe this is an awakening for our faith groups to really come together, because when you think about a crisis, let's say a hurricane hits the Gulf Coast, it's localized and people can support from all over the world, the nation, and they can provide food. Right now, the whole world, the entire planet is going through this crisis. And it's not just something far away for other people to see. They're experiencing it along with us. What do you think that tells us? How does this unite us as people, and where can we get that solidarity and comfort for knowing that this is something that brings us together in a very strange way?
Well, I think that our recent times have shown an epidemic of rabid individualism. That people are so concerned about themselves. I think that's why many churches and synagogues are having trouble bringing in the younger generation, because they've been trained to think of what's it going to do for me, not what I can do for the community. How can I be part of a community, but what's in it for me? How is it going to benefit me? And hopefully we learn now that we need each other, and maybe that'll change the culture. We hope. Who knows?
We certainly hope so, don't we, Rabbi?
Yeah.
We're also being reminded how frail life is.
Right.
I mean, we've got the best brains on our planet right now trying to solve a problem, and they're telling us they can't create a vaccine, for 12 to 18 months. I'm not at all being critical. I mean, I wouldn't know where to begin, obviously. But does that not tell us that we need each other? The world is fragile. The universe is fragile. And I think this is a great opportunity for people just to pray, to talk to God. And somebody the other day said, well, I don't really believe in God. And I said, well, pray to the God you don't believe in. I don't know if but pray, talk to your perception of God. Cry out to him. What does it hurt? What does it hurt? Cry out to him. And for those of us who do depend on prayer, I think it really helps for us to be people of passionate prayer, but also specific prayer. Every day, I think it's important for you to lay out your fears and say, Lord, I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid I'm going to run out. I'm afraid I'm going to be infected. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my parents. And just make that list. Make that list. In St. Paul's writings, he said, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and petition, let your requests be made known to God. And then he stuck in that interesting phrase, with thanksgiving, with thanksgiving. And, I think that's important too. And I know this is so much a part of the Jewish tradition, and that is the importance of gratitude, being grateful for what we do have, focusing on the blessings we do have. If we just stay focused on what we don't have, we're going to spiral down. But if we can be grateful, look around, what do we do have? That really helps us face the days of anxiety.
I was reading a book about anxiety, something I struggle with deeply. And the author was saying that gratitude is not just a practice that a lot of us think of as like, oh yeah, I just need like an attitude adjustment. And she said, actually in your brain, gratitude and anxiety come from the same center, and you can't do both at once. And so actually making those lists of things you're thankful for is actually physiological anxiety relief, which I think for many people who really do struggle with this in the best of times, now is a critical time to be doing true things that are good for your mental health. And it turns out that gratitude is how we're literally made for it.
One of the principles of Jewish liturgy is that the prayer always must begin with a prayer of gratitude or thanksgiving before the prayer of petition. In other words, we thank God before asking for something.
I have another question for you guys. Kind of along these lines, I think a lot of people are really wrestling with this balance of it could be a lot worse, or like there's people in a worse state. Yes, we are all being affected somehow, but obviously for some people, this is a truly dire situation, either economically or health-wise, or just the disruption in their life has been I'm thinking of like the doctors and the healthcare workers, like that level of disruption has been catastrophic. And so, but at the same time, this really is something that if we don't tend to our anxiety and our fear, can swallow us up and sideline us, the helpers. And so, I'd just love to hear both of you speak to that tension and that balance of, yes, it could be worse. Yes, it's still real for you. And how do we keep perspective?
Max?
Okay. Well, I was about to defer to the rabbi, but he did
that before.
We talked about gratitude. Can I bring up another tool that I think is really important in dealing with the crisis? And that's grief. It's grief. As the rabbi can tell you, there's an entire book in the Hebrew scriptures called Lamentations. It's important to lament. Somebody in a comment, in a conversation, I can't remember, it doesn't matter where it was. They made a comment, they said, Max, this feels a lot like grief. And ever since then, I've realized that's what I'm feeling too. Some of it is superficial grief. I really grieve not having baseball season. I mean, I really do. I really grieve not getting to watch the Masters. I love the Masters. I really do grieve not getting to see my family at Easter. And those are wonderful springtime events, and it's sad. But then on top of that, we're grieving the loss of safety. We're grieving a sense of loss of innocence. We're grieving the pandemonium that's going on. And then we're grieving, we thought we had our future figured out, and now it's upside down. So with that said, I'm urging people, grant yourself as many meltdowns as you need. Just give yourself a good meltdown. For me, I go outside. I'm at home right now. I'll go outside and I'll just kind of shake my fist at heaven and say, God, I don't think I can take anymore. And I'll let it out. I'll let it out. And then I find some peace. I don't know why. I don't know how to explain that. And maybe that speaks to my mental state. But if we try to pretend it's all okay, that's not going to work. And so grant yourself as many meltdowns as you need, but then take a deep breath and say, okay, Lord, my eyes are still on you. I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to, deal today with whatever you give me.
Well, that's very, very wise, Max. Very, very profound words. In our own Jewish tradition, we encourage the expression of grief. And we see this particularly after the death of a loved one, especially a parent, where we are enjoined from the day of the burial for an entire year to be in mourning, to remember our loved ones. Now, very traditional Jews go to synagogue 3 times a day to pray for the soul of the deceased. There are certain restrictions on a person's behavior. For example, the first month after one's loss, one's not supposed to engage in any form of entertainment, not to go to parties, not to listen to joyful music on the radio or on the TV, because it's a time to let it all hang out, to express, to void. In fact, at the funeral itself, we place a ribbon on one's lapel, and we cut the ribbon to show that the heart's been torn. So expressing grief is important, but we also have to balance it with an expression of thanks, because we have it a lot better than a lot of people.
Yeah, and here we are in the same conversation, right? Talking about gratitude and grief.
Yeah.
Both of them are part of what we're feeling. Both of them can help us heal. And I think whatever you need to turn to on a given moment and a given day, it's essential. And for the Christian, we think about Jesus on the night before his crucifixion, going into the Garden of Gethsemane. And he wasn't trying to act tough. He wasn't trying to act strong. according to scripture, he fell on his face and he cried out 3 times, Lord, if possible, deliver this from me. He cried out 3 times. And so it was a hard thing. It was a hard thing. But then, by God's grace, he had the strength to stand up and fulfill his mission. So give yourself some time for grief. And that's all part of managing this anxiety.
Wow, if we learn nothing else, that's just not something Americans are very good at, is sitting with it and letting it, just that feeling of that this is a necessary process to go through. It's really something we want to rush or avoid if at all possible.
Yeah.
And the way we've handled death in the American culture is a good example. We kind of go back to work the next day and pretend that nothing happened.
Yeah.
I remember in the story of King David, when he learned of the death of Saul and Jonathan, he commanded the entire nation to mourn.
Yeah.
He told the whole nation to mourn. Can you imagine somebody doing that today? But it was a good part of the healing process for the entire nation to mourn. And I think we've got to let ourselves do the same.
Yeah. I was laughing because I gave up at the beginning of the year, not for Lent, but just at the beginning of the year, gave up alcohol and sugar for health reasons. And I could not have picked a worse time. The alcohol and sugar.
The timing was off.
At the same time, it has forced me to not self-medicate in a dangerous way, but it's forced me to kind of go, wow, I really, really feel this. I really want to run and just eat all the raw cookie dough in the fridge, or bust open the bottle of wine I've been saving or whatever, because I am full of feelings.
Yeah.
And has made me actually sit with those feelings a little more.
You're not alone with that. Porn watching, excuse me for just being so blunt here. Esquire magazine this week said porn watching is up 30%.
Oh, gosh.
The sale of alcohol is, I want to say 56%. Please don't quote me on that, but over this last year. And Netflix binge watching is off the charts.
Oh, sure.
Everybody's trying to deal with this, I don't know, this fear that's suddenly coming into our world.
Yeah.
Also, I think we need to have Max talked about the fact that all of us are finite, that our earthly journey is not going to last forever. And I think the fact that we can't find that the greatest minds in the world can't discover a vaccine right now means that we should be humble, that we're not God. We only have a God who's above us. And we are mortal, frail, limited, imperfect people.
There you go. Yeah.
When I reflect on, watching faith communities react, we see these congregations that are kind of forcing, they really want to come back together, and they're kind of breaking either state laws, local laws, whatever things are ordinance in place. And I think about, I really want to put myself in their shoes, where they believe that there's something so sacred, right? There's something so sacred, we have to do this. There's nothing more important than this sacred tradition or this sacred gathering, or our faith, our church on Sundays, or on Friday services, or whatever we do. And I'm reminded of Isaiah 58. Right now we're in the Lenten season in the Christian tradition, a few more days of Lent. And we often fast, and we think about fasting. And Isaiah 58 talks about this, where he was seeing people try to be pious and be holy, rolling in ashes, making themselves blowing trumpets, doing all these sacred things which they thought were sacred and pious, but yet was nothing what God really wanted from the people. And Isaiah reminds us, and I'm going to try to read it here, what's really important, right? So I guess I would ask those pastors that are meeting, what really matters more to you? These sacred traditions, this pious behavior, or the people around you, the people we're supposed to serve? And this is what Isaiah 58 says. Is this not the kind of fast I have chosen for you, Isaiah says, to loose the chains of injustice, to unite the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free, and break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry and provide poor wandering with shelter? When you see the naked, you clothe them, and not turn away from your own flesh and blood. And if you do this, it says, the light will break forth like the dawn, and the Lord will be our rear guard, which I think is a powerful, powerful image of our God being our rear guard. And it just reminds us that some of the things that we find sacred, that we find pious, the ashes on our foreheads, all these things that we make ourselves look really good, what really matters most is that we need to serve the people around us as best as we can. And in this instance, it's sometimes not being physical with other people is the best way to serve and be holy. And I think Isaiah 58 always reminds me what really matters more. So it's just kind of something that I always have to remind myself, especially when I get caught up in my own selfish behaviors. Rabbi, before I want to honor your time with us, I know you have to prepare for a meal. Are you still good on time?
I really should go shortly, yes.
Okay, good. Rabbi, before you leave, can you offer us right here toward the end of our time, and then we'll get back with Max, some type of a benediction or prayer or a blessing maybe that you have in mind?
Yes. O Lord our God, source of hope, as we celebrate this sacred season during the springtime, when renewal and rebirth are the themes of both Passover and Easter, we ask you to give us boundless hope, unlimited hope, that though weeping may tarry for the night, joy will indeed come in the morning, and better times will indeed reign ahead. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Rabbi, thank you for being with us. We're going to bring Beckett back in.
Joy, and thank you for your convening these pub theologies and bringing in many different diverse viewpoints and perspectives. I greatly appreciate what you've done, Gavin, and the hard
And
work.
before you leave, I almost forgot. Unfortunately, you were this is a casualty here. Your 80th birthday just passed, I believe.
Yes, last August.
Yeah, and we were going to celebrate it. We had this big celebration planned, and it's been postponed.
Yeah.
For your 80th year. So I can't wait to see you and celebrate your 80th birthday. I'll bring Max, and we'll crash the party. And
you don't have to crash; you'll be invited.
Okay. Well, when I get that letter again from from Temple Bethel, I'll make sure to be at the new date. So thank you, Rabbi, for being here and being part of.
Thank you, and a sacred. I wish you happy Easter, and that good times will be ahead.
All right, thank
All
you.
the best, Rabbi.
Well, wow, what a joy to be with Rabbi Stahl, and just what a great clergy person in our city for many decades,
many years.
Yeah, and I can't wait to celebrate his birthday with him. You know, Max, I'll ask a question, then Becca can probably jump back in. When we're talking with people, and we've spent a lot of times on faith traditions, when somebody, and we've talked a little bit about this, but when somebody doesn't have so much of a faith background or tradition, maybe they don't believe in the triune God or the Jewish God or any type of religious God, how do you get, and how do we talk to people and to still feel this hope that still needs to be found? How can we really reach people who might be right now in a completely different space than faith traditions?
You know, one of my favorite stories, and forgive me if you just heard this because I retold it in a news article that went out and got pretty good distribution. But one of my favorite stories has to do with a general who retired here in San Antonio by the name of Robbie Risner. And General Risner was a POW in Hanoi for 7.5 years. And he was in what they called the zoo. And it was just, misery came standard issue. I mean, there was torture torturing all the time. They were in solitary confinement, no news from home, cut off from family. And I had the honor of meeting him over the phone. He was too frail to meet in person, but we talked over the phone. I just wanted to hear his story. And this was probably in maybe 2001, 22, something like. Anyway, it's been a long time. He told me of the way he coped. It's soon after he was in his cell, he realized that he could pry loose the grate from the floor that connected to a drainage area, and he could pry loose that gate, and he put his head down in it, and he could find through a pencil sized hole in the brick, he could see one blade of grass. And he every day would start his day on his belly, head down in the hole, looking at that blade of grass. That was the only color in his world. It was the only color in his world. And he said that blade of grass was like a blood transfusion for his soul. And I would encourage everybody in a time of desperation to find that blade of grass, to find that reminder of life. For those of faith, we find it through prayer and scripture. For those who don't share that source of strength, find it in the laughter of a child. Find it in the love that you see in your spouse, or the kindness that you hear through a friend. Find it in the renewal of nature. But don't let yourself go on a fast of hope. Okay? You've got to find some hope. And sometimes it's not easy. And General Risner said he would look at that blade of grass every day to remind him that there was hope out there. And so for the person who doesn't share my source of hope, I would tell him there's a blade of grass out there then. You find it. But whatever you do, don't give in to despair.
That's beautiful. One thing that I find helpful with my friends that may not have the same belief system as me is the idea of, and we've said a lot of Christian words and religious words here, but the idea of love, that God is love. And a lot of people may not identify with the God and this image of God that we have in our head, but they do identify with love. And how can we find love for one another, love for the creation around us, like you said, the nature around us? And a lot of people, if we can start there, if we can start back with love, they can understand that. And it says, and it matches scripture perfectly, God is love. It says in 1 John and other places that people can identify with maybe not a bearded God or the gods that sometimes they think we're portraying, but they'll do it to identify with love. And I think right now more than ever, we can really push that and show people that love is what lasts. And beyond any differences that we might have, when we love one another, that's where we see God the most in these times. Becca, I'm going to bring you back in. As we've had this wonderful discussion with Max Lucado and the rabbi and the mayor, what are some of your final questions or thoughts that you might have for Max?
I honestly, I've been sitting here trying to think, like, what's the follow-up question? But I think one of the things that a lot of us are struggling with is that this is such a new time. And so our usual, even knowing the questions to ask. As a journalist, I have been actually helping with some resources, trying to help us know what questions to ask. Because the ordinary world and the way that we look at it and interpret it is on its head. And just like you guys have been talking about, like interpreting, how do you interpret fellowship when you can't be together? How do you interpret love when you can't give a hug or you can't do those expressions that we've come to rely on? And so as a journalist, it's like my normal questions don't seem to cover this event. And I think a lot of our, I'd love to hear your perspective on, so when churches are starting to be able to come back together, I was having this conversation with a pastor friend I think the word relevance is going to be a key word in how people saw the church as being relevant, maybe in a new way. Maybe they didn't realize how much they had depended on and how much they had needed that fellowship, but then also where the church was during the crisis and how it ministered to people. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts about our faith kind of expanding or rising to meet the moment and showing it's the ways that you've seen and felt and considered how our faith is going to people keep talking about the new normal and what's our tradition and our faith and our fellowship going to look like in the new normal, and how is Christianity going to prove its durability and its relevance in a very new, strange world?
That's a great question, Becca. It really is. I do think that we talked earlier in our conversation about Joseph in the Old Testament and how he was uniquely positioned to distribute grain to a world that was struggling because of the famine. And I think that the church right now is uniquely positioned to distribute hope and encouragement, love, kindness. That's what's in our silos. This is a unique opportunity for us, and I think we're seizing it. I really do. I mean, you're a lot more aware of what's going on in the church worldwide than I am. But here's, for example, here's an example. Every Good Friday, not every Friday, every Good Friday, I go to Nashville to participate in a Good Friday service. I'm sorry, my phone's going off, and I thought I had it turned off. I go to Nashville to participate in a Good Friday service. Of course, it got canceled. It was scheduled to be at the Bridgestone Arena, which seats 15,000 people, and it's a wonderful event that raises money for foster care of Tennessee. And when we heard that couldn't happen, Chris Tomlin, who's the artist, and we just thought, oh boy, that's not any good. And we got kind of down, but we accepted it. And then Chris said, well, maybe we could get this on TV. So we contacted Trinity Broadcasting, which is a religious broadcasting network. Well, we captured it. We captured the music and we captured the message, and we put it in a program that's going to be aired on TBN this Friday night. It's going to be in 82 countries. So what we thought was really a setback. We can't have this event for 15,000 people. We'll now be speaking to several million people. and I think that's an example of a Joseph moment, that God provided an opportunity to take grain, not just to this people that we thought, but expand it. And I think we'll look back and learn from this event how good God was and how he got us through it. Maybe one of our conversations needs to be on the other side of this. What did the coronavirus teach us? What did we learn? And make sure we learn it before we go too far.
Right. I think that's a great question.
Well, Max, I have a question for you. It's a simple question, maybe one we can kind of start concluding. And that is, in this time, when you've been at your home or with your wife or your family, what's been something that has surprised you? What moment that would have not happened if it wasn't for this shelter in place? Is there something that you look back on and say, man, that wouldn't have happened if? Is there a memory here that you can think of?
I think my wife's about ready to kick me out. I think she has had enough. I think if she might take she might take exposure to the virus over another day with me.
I don't believe that. She's probably hoping you were in Nashville, but I don't think that's true. I do know, and I'm grateful for you, and that is, and Ann Helmke is about to join us real fast. I'm grateful for you for your daily catch-ups. Like, you catch us up with you and what's going on, and you encourage us every day. You've been faithful in doing that, and another way we can connect with one another. And so I'm grateful for that and your passion. I'm even going to bring up Ann Helmke. She is the faith-based liaison for the city of San Antonio, and she's going to tell us how we can get involved in helping other people through an organization and really a platform called Sacred. And we're going to bring her right in. Ann, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Good.
Welcome. I know you're in meetings. Ann also works for the Department of Human Services here in the city of San Antonio, and they are daily on Zoom calls trying to figure out how the best way to serve the marginalized, the people needing food. So tell us, Ann, a little bit about Sacred, and I'm going to pull up the website at some point in this scene. But first, tell us about Sacred and what you've been up to.
Well, Sacred stands for San Antonio Community Resource Directory. We pronounce it Sacred, but it's one letter short of that word. But it is a full gathering of human care services in San Antonio that includes nonprofits, community groups, governmental entities and agencies, but it also includes all the congregations in San Antonio. And that's one of the rare components that you won't find in other directories. It's that whole, separation of church and state stuff. But we've put that together, and what it really then provides are the best services that are in proximity to where those are needed. So it could be congregations that might have an AA group, a congregation that might be able to help 5 people. So it's not a big organization that can maybe help 50 or 500 people, but it can make a big difference to those 5 that it can serve. So it also does a whole mapping thing. It's done by zip codes, and it's really, I think, user friendly because I'm not a tech geek, but I'm able to use it, and I utilize it a lot. In fact, we've been using it with COVID in particular because we can do mapping by zip codes. So we have volunteers, for instance, who are now volunteering from home. There are a lot of volunteer opportunities that are needed. We're just trying to figure out how to do them, but we are able to pull up maps of zip codes where people are at highest risk for COVID. And then that provides where those services are. And then we have calling volunteers who are calling those services to see what kind of things they need that can help them do their work better and faster, considering they're having to look at what they do in a totally different way, right?
Yeah.
So, but
I'm going to try to pull it up. You keep talking. I'm going to try to pull it up on the screen here.
Okay, good.
Hopefully I don't mess anything up. So I'm going to share my screen. Can y'all see it there? Am I doing it right? Yeah, there it is. So there's the secrecy. So tell us a little about that. You can enter your zip code, and you can find any of those resources.
Right. You just click on one of those columns, and then there's a drop down that goes into more specifics. We've had a huge batch of volunteers who've been working on this, calling every program that's listed there to see what they are doing right now, and if it's current, if they're open, if they're closed, and so it's one way you can help. I just got out of a meeting for virtual volunteerism, and that's really exciting. USAA, UTSA, the city, the Office of Innovation, working together so that we can really organize and tap into volunteerism and what's going on, and that there's a way to do that. And the other part of volunteerism that goes with that too are donations. Like right now, the food bank is really in need, and we need to be supporting that because food is the number one requested researched item on Sacred, but also on 211. So food is the number one need out there, and we all need to be working with the food bank and supporting that. So I'm very excited about this virtual volunteerism because it might really aid the entire community in organizing instead of having each congregation trying to figure it out, each I don't know if you can still see me. I just got a phone call, so I just anyway. So I'm really excited about that potential too. And we all kind of know that necessity is the mother of invention, the creation of invention. And I think that's one of the really exciting things that's happening in terms of COVID is that it's really pushing us into a creativity that many of us have dreamt and prayed about. But now it needs to be there. Some of us were just kind of going, we really need to do it this way, but now it's more, how are we going to do it this way? And that's exciting.
Well, that's great. It's sacred.org. It's
Sacred's been a good resource for people.
That's great. It's SACR.
Have you guys had a good chat today?
We have, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Can you still hear me? Uh-oh. Can you all hear? We'll bring everybody back in here. Can
you, Gavin? So whatever that's worth, I'm guessing that you can hear me. Ooh, good. Glad you kept hearing me. That would have been really embarrassing.
Well, thank you, Anne, for being here with us today. If you can't hear us, and I'm so sorry, but that's the great thing about technology. So thanks for being here at sacred.org and all the good work that you're doing in the city of San Antonio and Bexar County. So thank you, Anne. Can you hear Becca?
Can you hear me?
I can't. But.
Okay. We're going to wave. We're all going to wave.
Okay, we're waving. I see Gavin waving. You're all waving. I can see that.
All right. Well, we're going to
have
you.
Thanks for everything you guys are doing.
Thank you. All right. Well, awesome. She's one of my San Antonio heroes. And, Anne started one of her earliest ministry jobs was at Grace Lutheran Church in downtown San Antonio, working with gang members and finding a community for those people. And ever since then, she's been the chaplain at Haven for Hope. Now she's with the city of San Antonio and a great woman of faith and a collaborator with all these different faith groups in our city. So I'm grateful for her and wanted to give her the time to share about Sacred. So as we conclude, it's about an hour and a half. It's great is normally Pub Theology is 2 hours, so at least we're shaving off 30 minutes.
There's not as many people to introduce themselves.
Yes, true. We lose that. But Max, is there any concluding remarks that you and Becca want to share today with us as we move forward and we continue in this kind of uncertainty, whether it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 8 weeks or more? Tell us a concluding word of hope.
I think it's important to try to just take one day at a time. That's the way God organized our lives. It's just one day at a time. But when he taught us to pray, he said, give us this day our daily bread. When he gave manna to the children of Israel in the wilderness, he just gave them enough manna and quail for one day. Sometimes our anxiety comes because we want to have the future figured out, and we want to have everything lined up for the future, every possible scenario anticipated. And I think planning is great, but we need to make sure that we trust God each day, and he'll give us what we need each day. And so my prayer every day is Lord, just please give me what I need today. And then tomorrow I'm going to ask you again. And that's our arrangement. And I think that works pretty good.
Becca, you have any thoughts? I'm asking you a question now. What's your thought?
I've just been so encouraged. I think all of this wisdom and guidance on holding different things at the same time, and the one day, like not needing there to be an overarching, this is how I felt during COVID, that every day we felt a little different, and that it's really creating a journey. That we talk a lot about faith journeys, but I think that this season of uncertainty is maybe showing us a lot more of what that might look like those of us who are used to saying, yes, I am on a journey and whatnot, but really our lives are so predictable, and we don't feel how much we need Jesus or each other or the church. We don't feel those needs as profoundly as we might right now. And so I've just been really encouraged, and I hope that y'all were too.
No, thank you guys. It means a lot. My dad writes me a letter every week. He's done it since I left for college.
Ugh.
And his dad did it
Your
to
dad-
him. Clifton Rogers, a Church of Christ preacher that bounced around Texas. And, it's crazy to have both of my granddads as pastors. But my dad ends the letter with me, and he writes, "I wish you enough." At every letter, right? If I skip a few weeks and I have to read them all together, they end the same, right? I wish you enough. And I feel like in this time, Max, when you talked about just having enough, just going one day at a time, I think that's what God is saying to us. Like he wishes us enough, and he will provide each day. So I really want to thank you, Max, and the time and the hour and a half you've given us to be here with us. I want to thank Becca for always being here, leading the discussion and the work you do. Max, can you, before you leave, tell us the article that we'll place that article online, the article you just wrote, or where was that at?
Yeah, that's called Surviving April. Surviving April. And it's on maxlucado.com. You'll find
All right.
it.
So we encourage you to not only go to maxlucado.com to see those devotionals and blog posts, but you can check him out on Facebook at Max Lucado's Facebook page. He gives a daily update during this crisis and words of hope and encouragement. And we wish the rabbi well in his Seder meal tonight. And I also want to thank the mayor of San Antonio for being with us at the start of this program. So if you're just now joining us, you can go back and rewind and hear from our mayor and the leadership him and his team and the county are providing this community during this COVID crisis. It's always a blessing to be with you at Pub Theology. If you have any questions or any concerns, reach out to us at Pub Theology or at Travis Park Church or go to Oak Hills Church and reach out if you need prayer requests or concerns that you might have. We want to be here for you, not only at Pub Theology, but me as a pastor and San Antonio as well. So if you have any concerns, let us know. We'll be here for you. Max, well, we're going to, instead of just saying goodbye, at the very end of this broadcast, we're just going to end it. Can you end us with prayer? And then that will just be the end of our broadcast together.
I'll do it. And so, Lord, we commit this time to you. All the things you've taught us, the importance of gratitude, the importance of grief, the importance of trust, the importance of community, the importance of hope. All these seem to just explode in significance in a season like this. We ask that we are learning what you are wanting us to learn. We do ask, Lord, that you would heal your planet. Heal your planet. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.